Hi, boys and girls. I'm going to try to finish the book today. When we left off last time, Kensuke had started helping Michael to build a brand new beacon, not on Watch Hill, but on the higher hill that was on his side of the island, in order to help him try to get rescued, so that he could go home and find his family. He forgave him for throwing the Coke bottle, and continued to share with him so much about his family, about his son Micaiah and his wife Kimi, and how he learned about Nagasaki being bombed. And then he continued to kind of quiz Michael on what Japan was like now and if it was rebuilt, which has me wondering if he'll leave the island with him. I asked you to think of a way to persuade Kensuke to come with him. And I got a few emails from some of you on how you would try to convince him. I really appreciated reading those. Thinking about the good and the bad when it comes to why Kensuke might leave the island and why he might not leave the island. So right when we left off, Michael was telling him about all of the things that he knew about Japan, and Kensuke said, "I'm made in Japan person. Very old machines, still good, still very strong." Try as I did to trawl my memory, after a while I could find nothing more to tell him about Japan, but he would still keep asking, "You sure there are no war in Japan these days?" I was fairly certain there wasn't, and said so. "They built up Nagasaki again after bomb." I told him they had, and hoped I was right. All I could do was reassure him as best I could, and then tell him the same few things I did know over and over again. He seemed to love to hear it, like a child listening to a favorite fairy story. Once, after I finished expounding yet again on the amazing quality of my father's Sony stereo that made the whole house vibrate, he said very quietly, "Maybe one day before I die, I go back to my home. One day, I go back to Japan. Maybe." I wasn't sure he meant it, but it did mean that he was at least considering it, and that gave me some cause for hope. It wasn't until the night of the turtles, though, that I came to believe Kensuke was really serious about it. I was fast asleep when he woke me. "You come, my cousin. Very quickly, you come, he said. "What for?" I asked him. But he was already gone. I ran out after him into the moonlight and caught him halfway down the track. "What are we doing? Where are we going? Is it a boat?" "Very soon, you see. Very soon." Stella stayed at my heels all the way to the beach. She never liked going out in the dark very much. I looked around. There was nothing there. The beach looked completely deserted. The waves lapped listlessly. The moon rode the clouds, and the world felt still about me as if it were holding its breath. That's a good description. I did not see what was happening until Kensuke suddenly fell on his knees in the sand. They are very small. Sometimes they are not so strong. Sometimes in the morning birds come and eat them. And then I saw it. I thought it was a crab at first. It wasn't. It was a minuscule turtle, tinier than a terrapin, clambering out of a hole in the sand and then beetling off down the beach toward the sea. Then another, and farther down the beach, dozens of them. Hundreds I could see now, maybe thousands, all scuttling across the moonlit sand into the sea. Everywhere the beach was alive with them. Stella was nosing at one, so I warned her off. She yawned and looked innocently up at the moon. I saw that one of them was on its back at the bottom of the hole, legs kicking frantically. Kensuke reached down, picked it up gently, and set it on its feet in the sand. "You go to sea, little turtle," he said. "You live there now. You soon be big, fine turtle, and then one day you come back and see me, maybe." He sat back on his haunches to watch him scuttle off. Every time the author says that, I kind of picture Kensuke as a monkey or an orangutan. How he sits back on his legs like that. The description of sitting back on his haunches always makes me picture him that way. "You know what they do, Micah? Mother turtles. They lay eggs in this place. Then one night time every year, always when moon is high, little turtles are born. Long way to go to sea. Very many die. So I always stay. I help them. I chase birds away so they not eat baby turtles. Many years from now, when turtles are big, they come back. They lay eggs again. True story, my cousin. All night long, we kept our vigil over the mass birth as the infant turtles made their run for it. We patrolled together, reaching into every hole we found to see if there were any left, stuck or stranded. So it sounds like there wasn't just one nest, there was multiple. We found several too weak to make it the journey and carried them down into the sea ourselves. The sea seemed to revive them. Away they went, no swimming lessons needed. We turned dozens right side up and shepherded them safely into the sea. When dawn came and the birds came down to scavenge, we were there to drive them off. Stella chased and barked at them after them, and we ran at them, shrieking, waving, hurling stones. We were not entirely successful, but most of the turtles did make it into the sea. But even here, they were still not entirely safe. In spite of all our desperate efforts, a few were plucked up out of the water by the birds and carried off. By noon, it was all over. Kensuke was tired as we stood ankle-deep in the water, watching the very last of them swim away. He put his arm on my shoulder. That small gesture right there, it's crazy to think about how far they've come. They very small turtles, my cousin, but they very brave. They braver than me. They do not know what they find out there, what happened to them, but they go anyway, very brave. Maybe they teach me a good lesson. I make up my mind. When one day ship come, and we light fire, and they find us, then I go. Like turtles, I go. I go with you. I go home to Japan. Maybe I find Kimi. Maybe I find my Kaya. I find truth. I go with you, my cousin. Wow. I wonder if I'll stick to it. Next chapter is titled Killer Men Come. Shortly after this, the rains came and forced us to shelter for days on end inside the cave house. The tracks became torrents. The forest became a swamp. I longed for the howl of the gibbons instead of the roar of the rain on the trees outside. It did not rain in fits and starts as it did at home, but constantly, incessantly. I worried over our beacon, which was becoming more saturated now with every passing day. Would it ever dry out? Would this rain ever stop? But Kensuke was stoical about it all. It stopped when it stopped, my cousin, he told me. You cannot make rain stop by wanting it to stop. Besides, rain very good thing. Rain keep fruit growing, keep stream flowing, keep monkeys alive. You also, me also. I did make a dash up to the hilltop each morning with the binoculars, but I don't know why I bothered. Sometimes it was raining so hard I could hardly see the sea at all. Occasionally, we sallied out into the forest to gather enough fruit to keep us going. There were berries growing in abundance now, which Kensuke insisted on gathering. He didn't seem to mind getting soaked to the skin as much as I did. We ate some, but most he turned into vinegar. The rest he bottled in honey and water. For a rainy day, yes? He laughed. He loved experimenting with the new expressions he had picked up. We ate a lot of smoked fish. He always seemed to have enough in reserve. It made me very thirsty, but I never tired of it. I remember the rainy season more for the painting we did than for anything else. We painted together for hours on end, until the octopus ink ran out. These days, Kensuke was painting more from his memory. His house in Nagasaki, and several portraits of Kimi and Mikaya standing together, always under the cherry tree. The faces, I noticed, he always left very indistinct. He once explained this to me. He was more and more fluent now in his English. I remember who they are, he said. I remember where they are. I can hear them in my head, but I cannot see them. When we think about this, we have to remember that he's been on the island for a long time, like over 40 years. So it makes sense that he maybe can't picture them clearly anymore, even though he can still hear them. I spent days perfecting my first attempt at an orangutan. It was of Tomodachi. She would often crouch, soulful and dripping at the mouth of the cave, almost as if she was posing for me. So I took full advantage. Kensuke was ecstatic in his delight at my painting and lavish in his praise. One day, my cousin, you will be fine painter, like Hokusai maybe. That was the first shell painting of mine he kept and stored away in his chest. I felt so proud. After that, he insisted on keeping many of my shell paintings. He would often take them out of the chest and study them carefully, showing me where I might improve, but always generously. Under his watchful eye and the glow of his encouragement, every picture I painted seemed more accomplished, more how I wanted it to be. Then, one morning the gibbons were howling again and the rains had stopped. We went fishing in the shallows, out at sea too, and had very soon replenished our stores of smoked fish and octopus ink. We played soccer again, and all the while the beacon on the hilltop was drying out. Wherever we went now, we took binoculars with us, just in case. We very nearly lost them once when Kikenbo, Tomodachi's errant son, always the cheekiest, most playful of all the young orangutans, stole them and ran off into the forest. When we caught up with him, he didn't want to surrender them at all. In the end, Kensuke had to bribe him, a red banana for a pair of binoculars. But as time passed, we were beginning to live as if we were going to be staying on the island forever, and that began to trouble me deeply. Kensuke made repairs to his outrigger. He made more vinegar. He collected herbs and dried them in the sun, and he seemed less and less interested in looking for a ship. He seemed to have forgotten all about it. He sensed my restlessness. He was working on the boat one day, and ever hopeful, I was scanning the sea through the binoculars. "It is easier when you are old like me, my cousin," he said. "What is?" I asked. "Waiting," he said. "One day a ship will come, my cousin. Maybe soon, maybe not so soon, but it will come. Life must not be spent always hoping, always waiting. Life is for living." I knew he was right, of course, but only when I was lost and absorbed in my paintings was I truly able to obliterate all thoughts of rescue, all thoughts of my mother and father. I woke one morning, and Stella was barking outside the cave house. I got up and went out after her. At first, she was nowhere to be seen. When I did find her, she was high up on the hill, half growling, half barking, and her hackles were up. I soon saw why. A junk. A small junk far out to sea. Now, when the author uses the word junk there, we have to assume that it means some type of boat. I'm wondering why they use the term junk, if that's a sailing term, or what exactly it means. I scrambled down the hill and met Kensuke coming out of the cave house buckling his belt. Out of the cave house buckling his belt. "There's a boat!" I cried. "The fire! Let's light the fire!" "First I look," said Kensuke, and, despite all my protestations, he went back into the cave house for his binoculars. I raced up the hill again. The junk was close enough to shore. They would be bound to see the smoke. I was sure of it. Kensuke was making his way up toward me infuriatingly slow. He seemed to be in no hurry at all. He studied the boat carefully now through his binoculars, taking his time about it. "We've got to light the fire," I said. "We've got to." Kensuke caught me suddenly by the arm. "It is the same boat, my cousin. Killer men come. They kill the gibbons and steal away the babies. They come back again. I am very sure. I do not forget the boat. I never forget. They were wicked people. We must go quick. We must find all the orangutans. We must bring them into the cave. They'd be safer there." It did not take him long to gather them in. As we walked into the forest, Kensuke simply began to sing. They materialized out of nowhere in twos and threes until we had 15 of them. 4 were still missing. We went deeper and deeper into the forest to find them, Kensuke singing all the while. Then 3 more came crashing through the trees, Tomodachi amongst them. Only one was still missing, Kikenbo. Standing there in a clearing in the forest, surrounded by the orangutans, Kensuke sang for Kikenbo again and again, but he did not come. Then we heard a motor start up. Somewhere out at the sea, an outboard motor. Kensuke sang out again, louder now, more urgently. We listened for Kikenbo. We looked for him. We called for him. "We cannot wait any longer," said Kensuke at last. "I go in front, my cousin, you behind. Bring last ones with you. Quick now." And off he went up the track, leading one of the orangutans by the hand and still singing. As we followed, I remember thinking that this was just like the Pied Piper leading the children away into a cave in the mountainside. I had my work cut out in the back. Some of the younger orangutans were far more interested in playing hide and seek than following. In the end, I had to scoop up 2 of them and carry them, one of them in each crook of my arm. They were a great deal heavier than they looked. I kept glancing back over my shoulder for Keegan-Bo and calling for him, but he did not come. The outboard motor died. I heard voices, loud voices, men's voices, laughter. I was running now, the orangutans clinging around my neck. The forest hooted and hollered in alarm around me. As I reached the cave, I heard the first shots ring out. Every bird, every bat in the forest lifted off so that the screeching sky was black with them. We gathered the orangutans together at the back of the cave and huddled there in the darkness with them as the shooting went on. Of all of them, Tomodachi was the most agitated. Agitated means upset, like they're having a hard time calming her. Why would she be agitated? Well, if you remember, Keegan-Bo is her son, a naughty son, and he's not with them. But they all needed constant comfort and reassurance from Kensuke. All through this dreadful nightmare, Kensuke sang to them softly. The hunters were nearer, even nearer, shooting and shouting. I closed my eyes. I prayed. The orangutans whimpered aloud as if they were singing along with Kensuke. Remember what somebody who illegally hunts animals is called? Starts with a P. I know many of you know what this word is that I'm thinking of. And we know that they still do this today. So it's not a surprise that they would come to their island to try to find monkeys or gibbons. All this while, Stella lay at my feet, a permanent growl in her throat. I held on to the ruff of her neck, just in case. The younger orangutans burrowed their heads into me wherever they could, under my arms, under my knees, and they clung on. The shots cracked so close now, splitting the air and echoing around the cave. There were distant yells of triumph. I knew only too well what this must mean. After that, the hunt moved away. We could hear no more voices, just the occasional shot. And then nothing. The forest had fallen silent. We stayed where we were for hours. I wanted to venture out to see if they had gone, but Kensuke would not let me. He sang all the time, and the orangutans stayed huddled around us until we heard the sound of the outboard motor starting up. Even then, Kensuke still made me wait a while longer. When at last we did emerge, the junk was already well out into sea. We searched the island for Keegan-Bo, sang for him, called for him. There was no sign of him. Kensuke was in deep despair. He was inconsolable. He went off on his own, and I let him go. I came across him shortly after, kneeling over the bodies of 2 dead gibbons, both mothers. He was not crying, but he had been. His eyes were filled with hurt and bewilderment. We dug a hole in the soft earth on the edge of the forest and buried them. There were no words left in me to speak, and Kensuke had no songs left to sing. We were making our sorrowful way back home along the beach when it happened. Keegan-Bo ambushed us. He came charging out of the trees, scattering sand at us, and then climbed up on Kensuke's leg and wrapped himself around his neck. It was such a good moment, a great moment. That night, Kensuke and I sang 10 Green Bottles over and over again, very loudly over our fish soup. It was, I suppose, a sort of wake for the 2 dead gibbons, as well as an ode to joy for Keegan-Bo. The forest outside seemed to echo our singing. But in the weeks that followed, I could see that Kensuke was brooding on the terrible events of that day. He set about making a cage of stout bamboo at the back of the cave house to house the orangutans more securely in case the killer men ever did return. Hearing that he's taking steps to try to keep the orangutans safe, and that he seems to be really worrying about them, has me wondering and thinking, will he feel more compelled to stay on the island and protect them rather than leaving? He kept going over and over it, how he should have done this before, how he would have never forgiven himself if Keegan-Bo had been taken, how he wished the gibbons would come when he sang, so he could save them too. We cut down branches and brush from the forest and stacked them outside the cave mouth so they could be piled and pulled across to disguise the entrance to the cave house. He became very nervous, very anxious, sending me often to the hilltop with the binoculars to see if the junk had returned. But as time went by, as the immediate threat receded, he became more his own self again. Even so, I felt he was always wary, always slightly on edge. Because he was keeping so many of my paintings, we found we were running out of good painting shells. So early one morning, we set off on an expedition to find some more. We scoured the beach, heads down, side by side, just a few feet apart. There was always an element of competition with our shell collecting. Who would find the first, the biggest, the most perfect? We had not been at it long, and neither of us had yet found a single shell when I became aware that he had stopped walking. "My cousin," he breathed, and he was pointing out to the sea with his stick. There was something out there, something white, but too defined, too shaped to be a cloud. We had left the binoculars behind. With Stella yapping at me all the way, I raced back along the beach and up the track to the cave house, grabbed the binoculars, and made for the top of the hill. A sail. 2 sails. 2 white sails. I bounded down the hillside back into the cave and pulled out a lighted stick from the fire. By the time I reached the beacon, Kensuke was already there. He took the binoculars from me and looked for himself. "Can I light it?" I asked. "Can I?" Just that element of waiting for Kensuke's approval shows you the relationship that they've built while they've been on this island together. "All right, my cousin," he said. "All right." I thrust the lighted stick deep into the beacon, in amongst the dry leaves and twigs at its core. It lit almost instantly, and very soon flames were roaring up into the wood, licking out at us as the wind took them. We backed away at the sudden heat of it. I was disappointed there were so many flames. I wanted smoke, not flames. I wanted towering clouds of smoke. "Do not worry, my cousin," Kensuke said. "They see this, for sure, you see." We took turns with the binoculars. Still, the yacht had not turned. They had not seen it. The smoke was beginning to billow up into the sky. Desperately, I threw more and more wood onto the fire, until it was a roaring inferno of flame and dense smoke. I had thrown on almost the very last of the wood we'd collected when Kensuke said suddenly, "My cousin, it is coming. I think the boat is coming." He handed me the binoculars. The yacht was turning. It was very definitely turning, but I couldn't make out whether it was toward us or away from us. "I don't know," I said. "I'm not sure." He took the binoculars off me. "I tell you, my cousin, it come this way. They see us. I am very sure it come to our island." Moments later, as the wind filled the sails, I knew he was right. We hugged each other there on the hillside, beside the blazing beacon. I leaped up and down like a wild thing, and Stella went mad with me. Every time I looked through the binoculars now, the yacht was coming closer. "She's a big yacht," I said. "I can't see her flag. Dark blue hull, like the Peggy Sue." Only then, as I said it out loud, did I begin to hope, I have goosebumps, that it could possibly be her. Gradually, hope turned into belief, and belief to certainty. I saw a blue cap, my mother's cap. It was them. It was them. "Kensuke," I cried, still looking through the binoculars. "Kensuke, it's the Peggy Sue. It is. They've come back for me. They've come back." But Kensuke did not reply. When I looked around, I discovered he was not there. I found him sitting at the mouth of the cave house with my soccer ball in his lap. He looked up at me, and I knew already from the look in his eyes what he was going to tell me. He stood up, put his hands on my shoulders, and looked me deep in the eyes. "You listen to me very good now, my cousin," he said. "I am too old for that new world you tell me about. It is a very exciting world, but it is not my world. My world was Japan long time ago, and now my world is here. I think about it for a long time. If Kimmy is alive, if my Kaya is alive, then they think I am dead long time ago. I would be like ghosts coming home. I am not same person, they not same either. And besides, I have family here, orangutan family. Maybe killer men come again. Who look after them then? No, I stay on my island. This is my place. This is Kensuke's kingdom. Oh, you guys know all year long how much I love when the author finally puts the title of the book in the book. This is Kensuke's kingdom. Emperor must stay in his kingdom, look after his people. Emperor does not run away, not honorable thing to do. I could see there was no point in pleading or arguing or protesting. He put his forehead against mine and let me cry. You go now, he went on. But before you go, you promise me 3 things. First, you paint every day of your life, so one day, you great artist like Hukosai. Second, you think of me sometime, often maybe, when you are home in England. When you look up at full moon, you think of me, and I do same for you. That way we never forget each other. Last thing you promise, and very important for me, very important, you say nothing of this, nothing of me. You come here alone, you alone in this place, you understand? I not here. After 10 years, you say what you like. All that left of me then is bones. It not matter anymore. I want no one coming looking for me. I stay here, I live in peace. No people. People come, no peace. You understand? You keep secret for me, Micah? You promise? I promise, I said. He smiled and gave me my soccer ball. You take ball. You're very good at soccer, but you very much better painter. You go now. And with his arm around my shoulder, he took me outside. You go, he said. I walked away, only a little way, and turned around. He was still standing at the mouth of the cave. You go now, please. And he bowed to me. I bowed back. Sayonara, my cousin, he said. It has been an honor to know you, great honor of my life. I hadn't the voice to reply. Blinded with tears, I ran off down the track. Stella didn't come at once, but by the time I reached the edge of the forest, she had caught up with me. She raced out onto the beach, barking at the Peggy Sue, but I stayed where I was, hidden in the shadow of the trees, and cried out all my tears. I watched the Peggy Sue come sailing in. It was indeed my mother and father on board. They had seen Stella by now and were calling to her. She was barking her silly head off. I saw the anchor go down. Goodbye, Kensuke, I whispered. I took a deep breath and ran out onto the sand, waving and yelling. I splashed out into the shallows to meet them. My mother just cried and hugged me till I thought I'd break. She kept saying over and over again, "Didn't I tell you we'd find him? Didn't I tell you?" The first words my father said were, "Hello, monkey face." Remember that from the beginning of the story? For almost a year, my mother and father had searched for me. No one would help them, for no one would believe I could still be alive. Not a chance in a million, they said. My father, too, he later admitted, had given me up for dead, but never my mother. So far as she was concerned, I was alive. I had to be alive. She simply knew it in her heart. So they had sailed from island to island, searching until they had found me. Not a miracle, but faith. Postscript. So that means like after the text. 4 years after this book was first published, I received this letter. Dear Michael, I write to tell you in my bad English that my name is Micaiah Ogawa. I am the son of Dr. Kensuke Ogawa. Until I read your book, I thought my father had died in the war. My mother died only 3 years ago, still believing this. As you say in your book, we lived in Nagasaki, but we were very lucky. Before the bomb fell, we went to the countryside to see my grandmother for a few days. So we lived. I have no memories of my father, only some photographs and your book. It would be a pleasure to talk to someone who knew my father as you did. Maybe one day we could meet. I hope so. With my best wishes, Micaiah Ogawa. A month after receiving this letter, I went to Japan and I met Micaiah. He laughs just like his father did. So reading that postscript has me wondering if part of this is true. I want some of you to Google it, learn more about Kensuke's Kingdom by Michael Morpurgo, and see if there are some elements of it that are true. I can't help but wonder with that description at the end. At the very end, there's a glossary. I will let you just take a look at it. You can pause the video and read through that yourself. Wow. So this book, I want you to think about where we started at. His parents lost their job from the big brick factory. Dad, crazy guy, decided to buy a boat and that they would sail the world together. His mother was so sick on the boat. They traveled all around the world. And one night while Michael was on watch, remember that the power steering had broke, and so somebody had to be on the wheel at all times. Then the ball fell into the water, and Stella was trying to bark after it, and she didn't have her safety harness on. And so then Michael went to try to stop her, and they both ended up in the sea. And then we thought that they were going to drown. And he said he heard some singing, and then he drifted off into sleep. And before he knew it, he woke up on a beach. And he tried to survive on his own. He found a cave. And then soon he started getting cared for. I want you to think about now where we're at in our story mountain. We're still not yet at that climax. We kind of hit a little bit of a climax when he falls off the boat and we think that he's drowning. And then he gets rescued. We find him on the island. And eventually, I want you to think about what the climax, what the peak of this story was, and how we ended up at our resolution at the very end of him and Kensuke becoming so close, living on the island together, and his family finally finding him. This was such a good book, one of my favorites. I hope you enjoyed it as well. And we'll have to see what our next read aloud's going to be.